Once the Pleiadian genetic experiments took off, giants of all sizes started to roam the earth from north to south, west to east. It is said that in the beginning these enormous creatures coexisted quite well with the already existing humans and didn't bother them too much. But the more they noticed their advantage due to their height and strength, some of them took advantage of the situation and began to dominate the smaller and, from their perspective, weaker humanity. Of course, these offspring of the Pleiadian fallen angels were the infamous Nephilim, who also found their way to the continent of Mu. Some of these giants were very wise and gentle and fit right into the Lemurian society where they could be of great help, both from giving a slightly different slant on spiritual matters. Knowledge some of them seemed to have embedded in their DNA, and from being able to lift heavy rocks, stones, and to build houses and temples, although none of them as perfect as the ones inserted by the gods. The Nephilim did not have access to that kind of technology. They worked with their hands. Imagine a 300-foot giant lifting something, if giants of that stature were actually common. A few of them together could certainly lift and move very heavy stones, albeit perhaps not whole mountains, as the legends go. It's uncertain if the Nephilim coexisted with the Titans or not. It could very well be that the few Titans who had survived the previous cataclysm came in one, or just a few groups and stayed in one area, while the Nephilim migrated to the big continent from another direction, and therefore they didn't really interact with each other. Another possibility would be that the Titans actually did interact with the early giants, and those who stayed friendly and gentle until the end. Either way, there were others of the Nephilim who were not as friendly, who set themselves up in order to rule over humans. In other parts of the world, this was not as hard to achieve as it probably was amongst the Mu societies, who were born free. Conflicts must have been quite common after a while, probably even open wars between humans and giants. Possibly, it could have been during such conflicts the giants got the taste for human flesh and became cannibals, a trait they may have had dormant in their DNA from having some Syrian genes. Just like the Syrians on the battlefield, the Nephilim liked to eat human flesh raw, and while the victim was still alive, according to legends such as those from Tarawa and the southern Pacific Islands. The interaction between the Lemurians and the Nephilim, however, lasted over a long duration of time, probably 10,000s of years. And this must have been when the cultures of Mu advanced into becoming more urban-like societies, or declined, depending on how we look at it. With help from giants, cities could easily be built, and giant buildings would most certainly have been erected for the Nephilim to live in as well. The Lemurian priesthood became more distant from the rest of the people due to that the whole tribes disconnected from nature to a large degree as they moved into cities or villages. Thus, the shamans also lost a lot of their natural psychic abilities and could no longer connect with the 96% as easily as they used to. Many communities and cities had also been taken over by males, who wanted the feminine divine powers and changed shamanism forever in their community. Things started getting more violent and disconnected from the goddess energy, and the ecstatic fire of the early Lemurians faded over time. More and more giants, as they multiplied all over the world, settled down in Mu, and many more of the violent and non-spiritual ones arrived as they noticed that the Lemurian people were easier to deal with because they didn't have an army or any real defense system, because they never had had to deal with war and violence before to any greater deal. History started repeating itself, and groups of Nephilim giants invaded cities and tribes and took humans as slaves. Some of them were eaten. It came to a point in certain regions of Mu, I feel, especially in the eastern regions, which now is the North and South American western shores, when whole tribes had to hide in underground caves in order to stay away from preying Nephilim. All of a sudden, severe earthquakes and tsunamis started haunting the lands, the weather changed drastically all over the planet, and some chunks of the continent fell apart and sunk under the ocean. It seems to have been a gradual process and not a one event, but many humans and giants died when the volcanoes erupted and land and water changed position. Of course, all this was due to orchestrated events, as Same entered the solar system and was intentionally setting course towards Earth. Enlil was behind it, as many of us know, but the whole story will be told in the next paper, and it differs from both Sitchin's and any other version I know of. simply because certain factors regarding the deluge have been overlooked. For the first time in the history of the Lemurians, diseases, plagues, and other serious conditions spread across the land, and many shamans who still had some psychic powers could feel the end was near. The weather became more and more erratic and new kinds of diseases spread between the tribes. Although the Lemurians were not a technological society as that of Atlantis, there was a lot of wisdom that would be lost if Mu was destroyed. And the leading shamans and their council of priests and priestesses were of course well aware of this fact. This wisdom had to be safeguarded for the benefit of future generations. The shamanic elders and their inner circle started storing information in all different ways possible. One of the more profound way was that of storing data in seed crystals. Allegedly, these crystals were programmed with the knowledge of old Mu. Reliable and well-trusted couriers were then sent out to different parts of the world, rich in crystalline growth. This way, the seed crystals could program other crystals with the same information, which would be stored in this fashion for potential civilizations to come, for those of the right consciousness to decode it. It is a known fact that crystals are transmitters and receivers of information. Depiction on rock walls in the American Rocky Mountains. Notice the swords, crowns and armors, not very Native American. Other ways the Lemurian priesthood stored knowledge was by writing on stone and clay tablets, similar to the later Sumerians, and in hieroglyphs on cavern walls in their hidden refuge places. When all this was done, the priesthood and sometimes their entire tribes went underground and stayed there through the cataclysm so that they could come up safely afterwards and start reseeding the planet. Their hiding places were deep inside Earth, away from the continent, on the American West Coast. As we know, many Native Americans say they come from underneath the earth. They, and the Mayans, the people, not the Mayan gods, are definitely offspring from the Lemurian civilization. We still can see ruins from the Lemurian cultures all the way through Arizona and New Mexico. There are places called cenote. They are extremely deep holes, filled with water. There is one on the Yucatan Peninsula at Chichen Itza. But there is also another one outside of Sedona, called Montezuma's Well. The latter is one of the major emergence points for those who stayed underground and came out after the final Lemurian cataclysm.
A lot of giants died as well as humans when the continent finally sank, while others made it to safer grounds, both in mountain areas, which are now atolls and islands in the Pacific, further out. West, China, Mongolia, Japan, East, the American continents, and South, New Zealand and Australia. Huge face of bearded man found on mountainside in Peru, age undeterminable. The Pleiadians say in a few different lectures that within some mountains on the west coast of the American continent there are sleeping giants, of the nicer kind, who will not wake up until a certain level of consciousness is raised on the planet, and sometimes they leave signs or indications as of where they are sleeping. According to them, the awakening of the sleeping giants will be soon. Does the inside of this mountain in Peru perhaps house a sleeping giant?